Now is Matt Siebold. He's a scholar in residence at the Center for Mark Twain Studies, an associate professor at Elmira College, and the host of the American Vandal podcast. Matthew, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I admittedly have not picked up a copy of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn in years. This is a very old-looking version, but it's not. It's not my old copy. It's a newly purchased version. I was immediately struck by how different it reads as an adult than when I read it in school. The overarching message in the book is much more evident when I read it now, which begs the question, does it make sense for high school students to read this book?
I think that's an excellent question. And as with most things, I feel like it's the kind of question that should be left to particular schools and particular teachers and, who know the most about their students, their classrooms, what they're ready to teach and what their students are ready to handle. I think undoubtedly, and we can get into the details of this, but I will simply say there was an effort in the mid-20th century to, Jonathan Iraq calls it hyper-canonization, right? To get Adventures of Huckleberry Finn specifically into classrooms at the high school level, at the college level, and even at the junior high level, right? There was something about this work that politicians and public figures were very eager to sort of force upon American students. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But I think that one of the reasons why we have problems with the book now is because it is sometimes or was sometimes force-fed to students, maybe students who weren't ready for it, right?
Here's something interesting, though. You mentioned the fact that this shouldn't be seen through the lens of being about post-racial America. It absolutely wasn't. It was about racial America and racist America. So let's discuss the language here. It goes without saying that the N-word is deeply offensive to us. It's uncomfortable to see it in print so many times. Conversely, many people laud Mark Twain for using the language of the time period and being arguably authentic in the voices. What's your take?
So I think far too often we lean simply on the sort of product of his time's defense, right? That Twain was merely reproducing common usages of 19th century border South citizens. And that this is where I think we go wrong, could not foresee the stigma that the N-word would accumulate in the centuries following the novel's publication. I don't think that's true. I think Twain absolutely understood that the N-word was a dehumanizing epithet, that it was a term of derision. And I think that's evident in how it's deployed in Huckleberry Finn. A critic, David Sloan, has explored how Twain uses it to signal the racism of otherwise kind people that Huck and Jim meet along the way. And I think more importantly, Huck's own use of the word fluctuates as he moves back and forth between embracing the white supremacy that's all around him and embracing Jim as his one true friend, whose humanity and even nobility is evident in their daily interactions, right? And if you look at those invocations closely, you'll notice that oftentimes he uses it when he's struggling with the idea of Jim as property, when he's struggling with his own sort of moral compass and the possibility that he is losing touch with, with the broader society. He will, fluctuate back into using the N-word over and over again. But then when he's thinking about the things that Jim has done for him and the things that they've gone through together, he doesn't usually use the word, right? He uses other terms and more humanizing terms and uses Jim's own name, right? And so I absolutely think Twain is using the term very intentionally, and he's using it in a way that's not just representative of what would have been common parlance of the time, but also recognizing that that word has power, right? And that it is dehumanizing and it is derisive.
There's arguably the most important part in the book is in chapter 31 when Huck Finn says, quote, "All right, then, I'll go to hell." Huck Finn would rather go to hell at that point than betray Jim, which speaks to something of the morality of the time, to what you were just saying. Heaven in Huck's purview has no place for someone who could actually sympathize with an enslaved man.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's a sublime scene. One of the secrets of Twain's success is how despite reputedly being a satirist, he knows how to produce sensation and sentiment. And chapter 31 is epiphonic, right? It's a perfectly executed sentimental climax. It marshals all the action which precedes it to make readers root for Huck to blaspheme, right? To defy the letter of the law. And more importantly, what he believes to be God's law, right? The scene gives me goosebumps every time, but it's not the end of the novel. And I'm going to lay a lot of this blame at Ernest Hemingway, who you quoted at the beginning. He famously calls Huckleberry Finn the origin of American literature, but he also says in that very same passage, right, that you have to stop reading at chapter 31. And far too many people take his advice. They ignore the fact that Huck's epiphany is not the end. It's a precursor to a tragic finality. Yes, this young man overcomes, at least temporarily, his prejudice, and that's a beautiful thing. But anti-racism is not simply a matter of winning the hearts and minds of individuals. Anti-racism requires changing laws, institutions, systems, power structures. Mark Twain's philosophy of human nature is that individuals are products of their environments, their associations, their material conditions. Huck Finn is at the very bottom rung of society. He's just one or two stratums above enslavement himself. What can he do about anything, right? He has this great epiphany, and there's no denying that in that moment, he's committed to making good trouble. But bringing about a society he wishes rather than the one he has, but he just gets bowled over by Tom Sawyer and the Phelpses almost immediately. It doesn't even take a judge or a deacon or a senator. His will to power is crushed by a slightly better off adolescent orphan. Right? Huckleberry Finn's not a hero. Right? There are no heroes. He says he's ready to go to hell, but 2 chapters later, he's resigned to being Tom Sawyer's sidekick again, while he tortures Jim for entertainment. And I'm sorry, but that's Mark Twain's America, right? That's what Twain saw in Missouri and Mississippi in 1881. That's what he heard Douglass saying on Emancipation Day. 1 million dead soldiers and a decade of half-hearted Reconstruction. And the Huckleberry Republicans were like, I'm sorry, Black people, you're on your own. Have at 'em, Tom.
It is good reason to read this book again. Matt Siebold is a scholar in residence at the Center for Mark Twain Studies. There's more, by the way, where this came from. I'm going to continue the conversation with Matt. You'll be able to stream our extended discussion exclusively on Peacock.